As we have a lot of ground to cover, I'm going to dig right into this one. So, welcome to the CTech Astronomy talk. As you can see, it is a different title than what is on the screen, but OPSEC 101 always have a sphere identity lying around. So, who am I? My name is Srdjan Vranac. I'm from Novi Sad. I'm a consultant who's been at this for some 20 years or so. If I'm not working or spending time with my family, I'm usually out and about with my dogs, getting lost on a trail somewhere in search of next adventure or something. And the title of this talk is actually an anagram of Too Many Secrets, which I picked from an old movie called Sneakers, which in real life is the motto of the National Reconnaissance Organization. It is a group that managed the American spy satellites. It kind of perfectly describes this talk. This is an interesting topic that took me some 3 years to write. And on top of that, when I started talking to people about it, I really got mixed reactions. When I was talking to C-suite people or vice presidents of engineering or something like that, they really loved it. You know, the eyes sparkle, heavy breathing kind of thing. But when I talk about it with developers, most of them went like, meh. So I knew I was onto something. So for those of you who expect this to be a DevOps talk, I'm going to disappoint you. Those of you who expect this to be some kind of a rant, you will definitely be disappointed. There might be parts of this talk that look like a rant, but I assure you it is not. These are the facts and observations that have been discussed and verified by our peers. This talk is aimed at developers who want to become better engineers, as I will touch on a few subjects that I find we are missing, and hopefully give you knowledge and actionable advice how to approach this subject and others. Please take note that every time when I say you, I mean we, because I'm right here and right there with you, making the same mistakes and trying to be better. So for starters, let's look at how this talk came to be. A couple of years back, when people started talking in PHP world about code architecture, naming conventions, all those nice things, I was having the mental equivalent of an allergic reaction. Every time those conversations came up, my brain just wanted to throw up. Unfortunately for me, the people around me at that time were missing the ability to meaningfully interact with me on the subject and help me find the answers to this conundrum that was bothering me. I mean, never underestimate the power to ask why, folks, and the ability to get to the bottom of the rabbit hole. Now, then about a year ago, a sequence of events started happening that ultimately led me to lose a lot of dead weight and open a whole new world of opportunities for me. And that allowed me to understand the problem that was preventing me to intake any knowledge, as I could finally give form to the sense of dread that I'm missing something that was critically important. Before we begin, I would like to get a feel for the room. This is where I ask a few questions and you raise hands. So let's try this. How many people here are CEO, CTO, C-something, or VP of engineering? Please raise your hands. Awesome. How many people here are team leads? Nice. How many people here are senior developers or engineers? Nice. How many people here like Uncle Bob and his teachings? Ooh, a lot less than I hope so. All right. How many people here like clean code architecture? Beautiful. How many people here like solving business problems? Okay. How many people here keep secrets or in config files like parameters, YAML, config ini, or any other clear text? Okay. How many people keep their secrets in environment variables? All right. For all of us that raised their hands on the last two, we are the problem. There is no soft language to be used here. There is no way to soften the impact. We are all guilty of this. Is my mic on? And we are building houses on hollow foundations, and we need to start fixing this. But before we talk about why this is a problem, we need to talk about how we ended up in this mess, right? In order for you to survive this talk and hopefully fully appreciate it, you will need to take off your engineering hat and put on your business hat. Be careful not to blink, or you might miss a part of it. Yeah. Now? Oh, all right. We talk about user experience, and we talk about customer experience, and of course, we go on and on and on about the developer experience. On the other hand, I rarely hear people talking about the business experience. So you see statements like this that you see on the screen are quite often, but what are the things that we as engineers can do to improve the business experience? Do we even understand the business experience? So in the next part of the talk, let's look at the perceptions of the business and the developers. So let's be clear first. Business people do some stupid things. It's not like they are infallible, but this is a two-way street, and we should really strive to generate traffic on our side. So why do so many engineers despise business sides of this industry? And by that, I do not mean hearing, reading business requirements that will be turned into code, but the fundamental truths and rules of the business. We are blue-collar workers of the 21st century. We churn out code and solutions, yet we pretend that we are on some kind of noble and mystical journey pursuing knowledge, while in reality, we are trading our time for money and trying to keep up with the latest trends in the industry. Yes, some percentage of us might be working on something that is significant, but majority of us will just hobble code together and try to survive the next change. Do we actually know the cardinal rules of business? The cardinal rule of business is to make money, of course, plain and simple. Every rule is made in hopes of maximizing profits and cost decrease. But what is the stated primary goal of a software engineer, right? It is to gain knowledge, to implement better and higher quality of code, to write better abstractions, to be happy, not to be obsessed with money or cost, to move from one job to other, to gain more expertise, not to be accountable, not having to explain, justify, or maybe defend to business the practices we do achieve for better quality, because we're above all that, right? We don't want to admit it that the knowledge is a byproduct of taking more responsibilities and challenges in tasks in hoping of landing the next better paying role, which of course will yield more knowledge. So I'm guessing all of you heard this before. Sales make money, engineers cost money. But do we actually know what it means? It means that time to market is your only real metric, that you need to be able to respond to the requests of your existing and new customers by shipping features in the shortest possible time frame with lowest reasonable cost and reasonable quality. You could argue that instead of time to market, I should have said profit or revenue, but you can actually recalculate time to market into any of those things and forecast, right? For the sake of this talk, we can safely assume shorter time to market means bigger revenue or profit. So instead of really digging into this, what do engineers do? They often like to waste money for all the wrong reasons. A couple of years back, there was a tweet I will never forget in my life by some well-known engineer, where he boasted that he forced a teammate to delete his PR and a branch and do it again, which the teammate had invested a week or two of work because, and wait for it, he wrote the tests after the code. Not even a discussion if the code does what it should, if the feature was complete, if the tests were green and correct. It was not done test first, it had to be destroyed. What awesome hubris. What an awesome waste of resources and time. And for what? For the fallacy of good code, where features lag behind, to your customers not being happy, to your potential sales falling through. And I'm guessing you already know this one. Like, I'm not a salesperson, I'm just a developer. And this might be one of the more dangerous self-delusions in this industry, because let me be clear on this. Every one of you is a salesperson. You might not realize it or refuse to accept it, but your commits at work, your tweets, your open source contributions, your blog posts, your rants, your talks, your interactions with past and present co-workers, interactions with management, are sales. You're displaying that you have the skill and that you know what you're doing, thus marketing yourself. Maybe someone will hire you now, or maybe someone will remember you in their next role when the company is looking for more bodies. So please stop deloading and own up to it. It is fine, everybody is doing it. It would just seem that in this industry, it is kind of a bad thing. Once you're able to do that and accept it, you will realize you are a business person as well. You can then start to understand how business sales actually work, and you can help bring true value, and you will start to improve and increase the business experience. So now it's time to learn about capital allocation, because everything is finite. Your life, your time, your patience, your product, your company's or your employer finances, right? This means that management or leadership, or whatever you call it, has a job to optimize the allocation of capital so it generates as much wealth as possible. This is the reason management will always prioritize new features over refactoring and or improving architecture, because this brings in money, not some perceived notion of technical debt. So for some of you that are guessing, like, did I actually do it? Yes, I did. I'm saying here that technical debt is a problem, but it is not even close on a level of problem that most developers perceive it. And by being driven into this mindless fear, we are unable to convey that to the business, and then we end up in fun places. So this is a statement from Anna Felina, and this is spot on. This is how you explain to business, and this is how you improve business experience. So the business understands better that you need to allocate some of the time for paying back the debt. The same way the business needs to pay back the loan to the bank. You need to understand the business and talk the language, and ubiquitous language is not it. With this incredibly well-put definition, you can then talk to the business in their terms and show them the value, and then LeBlanc's law, which is often used to scare us, becomes a non-issue and a thing of the past. Did you ever think about this yourself? Like, what is the mandate of a software engineer? Is it to follow the best practices and be this shiny beacon to other fellow engineers? Is it to take shortcuts and hack code together? Or is it to build and change the company culture? No. Your mandate as a software engineer is to find solutions for the problems presented with acceptable compromises between time, cost, and quality, with buy-in from the management or the leadership. That's it. No more, no less. Because let's be clear, I'm not saying that there should be no design, no tests, no whatever. I'm saying that we are throwing things against the wall and see what sticks. That means that you should go with your third idea about the problem, because your first idea is a horrible hack, the second one is kind of a bit better, and the third might not be great, but it will do because it opens door for refactoring later, which usually means that your best approach is that one of the feature has duplicated code. And mostly, like being separated from the rest of the project, because when people start using it, changes will come, and then second and third iteration, when things start become clear what and how the feature works, and yes, because impedance mismatch is a real thing, because what users want, what they describe, what gets translated into business requirements, and what happens are like completely different things sometimes. Not to mention that when users actually start using the feature, they will show you how wrong you are, right? And when you have real feedback, you can start integrating it into the rest of the application and refactor. Because in reality, your project will die because of the lack of sales and interest, not because of technical debt. So please, let's stop scaring folks with this term, right? And it seems that this is something that is being forgotten these times. Engineers are so obsessed with getting abstractions right, obsession about naming things, expressiveness, architecture, and all these shiny things. Yet few ask the question of how much it costs to develop. Like, is there a simpler, more cost-effective solution? Because few who will choose time to market with serviceable technical debt, who understand that the perfect is enemy of good, those that do, those are great engineers, and they are the ones that will drive your project forward. Now, some of you might not like what you're hearing. I mean, you might be offended by all of this, but the truth of the matter is, I might not have to work with you, but you will definitely have to work with someone like me. So you better be prepared, right? So at this point, I'm guessing some of you are wondering, like, why I'm talking about this and what does it have to do with security? Two reasons, really. One is the same way that we as engineers think and deal with business experience is the same way we think and deal with security. It is simply not an integral part of the project lifecycle, but more often than not, it is just an afterthought. The second one is that once you start thinking in terms of business experience and cost and expenses, security starts to climb more and more on your priority list. And if you know how to explain this to the management, you will get their buy-in to deal with it, and their buy-in and support for all the later things you will want to do, because they will know that you bring actual value to the table and care about their bottom line. All right. So now we covered how we got into this mess. Let's see about why, right? As some of you, hopefully a lot, know, security is not a simple subject. It can be quite wide. For the intents and purposes of this talk, I'm going to focus on one part, which might be simplest to fix and can be a project or company killer when mishandled, right? So, a median of 1,793 unique keys is leaked every day to GitHub. I mean, it's lovely. As a developer, this might be a meh moment for you, but as a business person or as an engineer, this should be a hair-raising experience, or in my case, hair-losing experience, right? In terms of potential damage to the business costs, both direct and indirect. So what are the common ways of revealing your secrets? Making the information public, for example, by committing them to the repository and making the repo public, or by malicious party gaining access to your infrastructure, for example, server. First case is mostly clear, but let's talk about the second one for a moment. Suppose somebody gains access to your server, and it can be done, regardless of your setup, which I hope you have one. I'm going to assume that it won't be done via malicious code and in one of your dependencies that don't have their versions tightened to a point release, right? In your dependency manager, because by now everyone should be aware that mistakes happen and that sometimes minor releases might pull down compromised implicit dependencies, because we are all aware of that, right? And if you're running Docker or Kubernetes, I'm going to assume that your container setup does not run under root, and it is the latest running version that has the most recent CVEs patched. If you have an infra or an ops team, hopefully they have monitoring in place. And if you don't have a dedicated infra team or in place, hopefully you have an email notification for an SSH login via PAM. So if you have this, you will get a notification, you will check with people who have server access, and if none of them is connected with SSH, then you can take steps to stop this bad actor, for starters shutting down the server and then proceeding from there, right? But on the flip side, the person who is accessing your server operates under the assumption that there is some kind of tripwire in place, and that once they log in, the countdown clock begins. They are in a race to get as much data as they can, which can be filtered through later. Right. Thank you, Andres. So if you have your secrets in your config or parameters YAML, you just handed the key to your data to someone because you were nice and hospitable. You're about to experience a lot of things, and some are going to be quite unpleasant. From incurring cost for a security incident review by an external consulting via losing profits during the downtime because of you, to losing your customers' trust and possible loss of customers, and your bestest code will have done nothing to save you from this. But your business experience and attitude towards security might. On the other hand, secrets and configs are quite easy to commit, and then mistakes happen. If you're still not with me on clear text secrets, let me tell you a story. There was a person working on a personal project that was using AWS, and in all his glory while hunting for the bestest code, they committed a AWS unscoped IAM keys to the repo, to the config, and then committed it to the repo, and then pushed to the repo. I mean, no biggie, what could possibly go wrong? Some time passes, and by accident, they make a repo public for 15 minutes. In those 15 minutes, someone scanned the repo, got the keys that they were committed, and went along their merry way. On the end of the month, the poor soul that committed the keys got a $15,000 bill, right? Because somebody had fun with keys that were readily available. This is a nice chunk of change to burn through if you're not being security-minded and making simple mistakes. Yes, GitHub now scans for your commits and it finds everything that is similar to IAM keys and a few other things to block it, but back then, it was very nasty. So we're going to skip this one because we're out of time. But yeah, you're more sophisticated than that and enlightened even, and you are in the hip crowd and you know better. So you're using the environment variables because awesome sauce, yay! And you're using the .env file to set them all up, right? So you have your local dev for your one file, and on your servers you either have another .env or set them up wherever. And then there is some chance again of committing the secrets, but again, people can do stupid stuff in production because what could possibly go wrong, right? Do I need to explain this, or like everybody's getting it? Then again, even if you have your envar files unindexed and using them properly, for a skilled person, they are not really hard to collect. And then we're again back in the problem situation, right? But wait, we are using containers. Woo, good for you. We are using environment variables in containers, so you're passing them to the Docker engine, and then I could use this snippet to list them out, right? Not to mention the ever-increasing mess as you need to pass more and more environment variables to your containers, for example, Docker file, right, like this. And as this monstrosity grows, how many hours are going to be wasted by keeping it in sync with the newly added vars, with teams with .env files, and then even a better question, how secure is your way of sharing said secrets? Meaning, are you sending them via email or possibly a chat client, right? Sure. But then we are going to switch to Docker secrets. I'm sorry, like, please excuse me, let's stop laughing, because you're telling me that you want to use a file-based clear text located in run secrets name. I mean, please tell me more about this security, right? I mean, even if you squint and pretend that this is not an issue, you should keep in mind that some of the official images might contain vulnerabilities, and I'm sure that each and every one of you actually inspect those images instead of playing Pokemon because you gotta have them all, right? If you're working on a project that has dedicated infra and ops team and they let these problems in production, you need to have a long discussion with the business and long discussion with them, with business present, about getting their act together and why their actions and decisions are ruining the business experience and that they need to improve, right? Because some of you may have an idea where I'm going with this, so I'm going to clear it up. Up to this point, we talked about some concepts, but I still haven't used their names yet. So here they are. Some terms you might know, but in case you don't, you should learn them. First one is liability. So here's an experiment. Ask your boss to have company counsel or a lawyer to sit down with you and discuss what would happen in a case of data breach and subsequent litigation where your company could be taken to court, right? And you have to prove that reasonable security measures were taken and that when asked how are your database secrets managed, you tell them they are in a config file. And when the counsel asks how are they stored in a config file, you tell them in a plain clear text. When they ask you to explain what that means, you tell them that anybody who can open that file can actually read the set secrets. And sit back, relax, and await their reaction as they grasp the situation, because then you'll probably be introduced to a nice term called criminal negligence. But wait, we have insurance, and we're covered for this. This is a non-issue. Some of you will say, sure, maybe if you're covered against cyber attack, but still, this is fine until it's time to claim it or it's time to determine the premiums, so you will have to again prove the reasonable security practices. Good luck to you when you start explaining to the adjuster that you're keeping your config files in plain text, because you got this, you will prevail, right? And then we come to certification, specifically ISO 27000. Hopefully, let me see, good. Hopefully, you actually get to work on a project where this kind of certification becomes a requirement. And when an example on for example, one of the bigger sales hinges on the fact that the project has certification, you will learn that things get expensive and costly pretty fast, because security and secrets management was not high on your priority list, and you cared more about your academic reasoning and proving that you have best as code, right? This is why I'm talking about the business experience and security together, because more often than not, they are the same facet of business. The cost or damage control and maximizing profit by not losing sales and decreasing liability potential, right? All right, so we now know how we ended up in this situation and why it is a bad situation. Let's take a look on how we can improve this situation. The answer is simple, secrets management applications. So what would be the important features of such systems? For example, ease of setup and operation, right? You want to be able to set up and configure your new secrets management system relatively easy, meaning the less messing with source code, the better. The configuration should be relatively straightforward and not be ambiguous. You should also have a clear path of upgrading and upscaling to HA solution or multi-data center. On top of that, the way your application should interact with secrets management systems should be as straightforward as possible. It is always a good idea to have an expiring secret, and your application should not care about this, just that when it emits the request for that, the fresh data will come in. On the other hand, the ease of these changes for your admins can implement new secrets is important, as you want them to be able to be efficient and cost-effective. And we come to my favorite part. At first, it doesn't mean much. But if you start thinking in terms of business experience, this suddenly opens a lot of options, meaning that if you squint real hard, all of your configuration can be treated as a secret. And that means it can be stored in a secret management system. But then, depending on the token or auth that the system receives, it can return different values. Meaning you can have a token for production, you can have a token for staging, and you can have different values for the same key. Add on top of that the local developer environment, right? And suddenly you have a nice cost reduction and increased security, because you will not be sharing the secrets anymore via email or instant message or whatever else, and the time wasted for your developers while they are waiting for someone to give them the new value of a newly introduced setting in the system goes down. Depending on the system you choose, this may vary to some extent, but you should always go for a system that communicates securely and that your data is encrypted when stored. What I want to actually say is SSL, TLS, HTTPS, all the comms. On top of that, the choices of backends where you can use local secure encrypted storage, or you can use an RDBMS or some piece of AWS or other cloud provider solutions would be great, because it increases the values of this system as you can tailor them to your needs more easily. And then we come to the cost. I mean, let's be honest. We all like costs to be close to zero. This is, of course, impossible. We can do a lot to keep them down, but still, having a straightforward installation and configuration, your team will spend less bill about those tasks, but by having something like dynamic secrets, you can keep your setup simpler and have more productive team where downtime due to misconfiguration becomes a thing of the past. Tools that manage these secrets are certainly nothing new. There is quite a few of them, and some of them are out there for like a number of years. Some of these tools are quite good, some of them are very weird. If I have to pick a system, I usually pick one that is backed by a company whenever I can. So I'm going to talk briefly about AWS Secrets Manager, because this is a AWS native way of storing secure static key value pairs. It does have some rotation abilities, but outside of RDS, you essentially have to write those functions on your own. Also, Secrets Manager is single region only. If the region lock is not a problem for you, there is a bigger potential issue, and that is the price, because it can wildly differ depending on your usage. So first example here is a production scale web application. So you have like 2 keys per server and 5 database credentials per database, so 2 API calls per SSH key per day, 24 API calls per database, per credentials per day, 7 API calls, yada, yada, yada. $6 a month. Not bad. I mean, kinda dirt cheap. On the other hand, if you're using microservices and using ephemeral secrets for 5 million secrets which are valid for 1 hour and 2 API calls per secret per month, that's almost $3,000 a month. That's pretty steep. So it's not really strange that Vault is the most commonly heard name in secret storage for infrastructure these days, because it comes from a reputable company that gave us Vagrant and Console. It's open source and free, which also has the enterprise support if you need some special things. And secrets in Vault are arranged in a tree with ACLs limiting access and allowing operations. There is a concept of lease that is used to recommend clients to refresh secrets once in a while. And in this manner, you implement a poll-based rollover functionality. For authentication, Vault offers a large variety of backends using GitHub or certificates, right? So why it is a good fit? Because it has a small binary to install, the configuration is straightforward, and with the use of SSL certificates, you get a nice secured HTTP transport for your secrets, right? And this can be done by a single developer or a non-dedicated infra person. On top of that, you have HA mode if you need out of the box, or you can scale it to console zookeeper situation, like depending on your needs. And you have the ability to select for multiple backends, which is certainly a plus again, which means you can tailor it to your approach and fit your needs better. And due to the nature of the Vault and the confidentiality of the data that it is managing, the Vault security model is very critical. The overall goal of Vault security is to provide confidentiality, integrity, availability, accountability, and authentication. This means that data at rest and in transit must be secure for eavesdropping or tampering. Clients must be appropriately authenticated and authorized to access data or to modify policy. All interactions must be auditable and traced uniquely back to the origin entity. The system must be robust against intentional attempts to bypass any of its access controls, right? So this is the schema of a Vault system. So when the Vault server is started, it must be provided with a storage backend so that the data is available across restarts. The HTTP API similarly must be started by Vault server so that the clients can interact with it. Once started, the Vault is in sealed state. Before any operation can be performed against the Vault, it must be unsealed. This is done by providing the unsealed keys. When the Vault is initialized, it generates the encryption key, which is used to protect all the data. That key is protected by a master key, and by default, Vault uses a technique known as SHAMIR'S secret sharing algorithm. Yeah, sorry, it's a mouthful. It is an algorithm in cryptography developed by Adi Shamir. It is used to secure secret in a distributed way, most often to secure other encryption keys. The secret is split into multiple parts called shares, and these shares are used to reconstruct the original secret. To unlock the secret via Shamir secret sharing, you need a minimum number of shares, and that is called a threshold. Basically, this is a fancy name for a two-man rule, and now we go back to the Vault, right? So the number of shares and the minimum threshold required can both be specified. The Shamir secret sharing technique can be disabled, and then you just have the master key directly for unsealing, but please don't do that. And once Vault retrieves the encryption key, it is able to decrypt the data in storage backend, and then it enters the unsealed state, right? Once unsealed, Vault loads all of the configuration, audit devices, auth methods, and secret engines. When client first connects to the Vault, it needs to authenticate. An authentication request flows through the core and into the auth method, which determines if the request is valid and returns the list of associated policies. Policies are just a named ACL rule, right? For example, the root policy is built in, and it permits access to all of the resources. You can create any number of named policies with fine-grained control over paths. Now, note that Vault operates exclusively in a whitelist mode, meaning that unless access is explicitly granted via policy, the action is not allowed. Since the user may have multiple policies associated, an action is allowed if any policy permits it, so be careful. Once authentication takes place and an auth method provides applicable policies, a new client token is generated and managed by the token store. This client token is sent back to the client, and it is used for future requests. This is similar to the way the cookies work when sent by a website after the user logs in. The client token may have a lease associated with it, depending on the auth method configuration. That means that the client token may need to be periodically renewed to avoid invalidation, right? At this point, all communication with Vault is done via HTTP requests. And even the CLI Vault tool is a wrapper for the HTTP requests. So once everything is ready, we can check the status of the Vault, right? You issue a vault status command, and this is your result. Or we can write a secret, because here you see the key equal value-based entry, but it is more secure to use files if possible, because sending the data via CLI is often logged in shell history. And down at the bottom, you can see the curl or HTTP request equivalent of it. You just emit a post method with the xVault token, where is the vault token you received, and you pass the full world and excited yes to an endpoint, and it records it. Similarly, you can read a secret. Again, vault kiwi, get secret hello, or curl request. You can read only the value of a secret, so you want to get the value of excited, you get yes. Same for the curl. If you need JSON, yeah, you got that. You can delete a secret via CLI tool or via request. And all of this and more can be done like curl widget or wget, and of course from many languages support making an HTTP request. So this is a PHP example. So at the top you declare a Guzzle client, you emit your headers, you want to get a certain value on an endpoint, you rewind the response, you decode the output, and you get the value. And this is basically all there is to it. Depending on your framework or the way your application is put together, you could use some of the libraries available out there that you could leverage, like psec, VaultLib, or you can leverage the Symfony environment variable processor to get the configuration you need from Vault. So, like, if everything is so good and simple, are there really no downsides to using it? Well, here are a few issues. First is sealing and unsealing, right? How are you going to manage the master encryption key shards or shares, right? What is your process for unsealing the vault in event of failure or restart? Where are the keys, who has access to them, and what would be the procedure in the event of failure of a key? This is something that needs to be considered seriously, because you could make your production unavailable for a good part of a day, hopefully just a day. The second is HTTP calls. This might be a downside, because I'm certain that like in 90% of cases and more, this is not going to be an issue. But if your network stack is over text, you could encounter latency. Then again, you can fix that and deal with that. So even with these potential drawbacks, using Vault or similar pays off a lot. Is your company and your product will be protected from unwanted liabilities, and in case of actual unauthorized server access, your configurations will be stored securely. Because according to the IBM security research, the average cost of a large data breach in which more than 1 million records are lost in 2018 was $3.9 million. This figure takes into the account the many categories of expenses arising from the breach, including lost business, technical investigations, legal penalties, and employee time spent on recovery. With this in mind, I believe it is significantly cheaper to invest engineering time to solve this low-hanging fruit than let it run its deadly course. Thank you. Any questions? Awesome. Let's see if I know how to answer them.
I think there are 3 questions. Let me check. Yeah.
All right. Where and how do you store the credential to connect to the Vault? See, that's an awesome question, because unfortunately it ends up in some kind of config file again. Yay. Yeah, it's fun, or environment variable. But the thing is, and that is exactly the point, this is something that is really throwaway, because you can rotate it easily. And if somebody actually goes and gets all of your configurations file from your server, this is the only thing that is exposed. And in combination with the tripwire system that I mentioned before, you can actually rotate your keys and roll out the change before somebody can actually make any serious damage. So hopefully that answers the first question. If putting access credentials in .env files is bad, what is the good approach? I think it's called Vault, but fine. Thank you for listening and being awake. What would be your approach for taking over a legacy application? What would you do first? Cry? I'm sorry, I'm jaded about this because I've been working on a lot of rescue projects. The first thing I would ask is ask for documentation, ask about the processes, check is there a local development environment, which usually there is none. And then I would try to seek knowledge where I can. After that, I would probably start looking, I don't know, for the low-hanging fruit, like how the security is handled, then start changing that, and go from there. Anything else? I hope I answered all of your questions. Thank you.